on how to transition from academia to science and medical writing careers. My name is Anna Drangowska-Way, and I'm a member of Communication and Outreach Subcommittee of the Early Career Scientist Leadership Program at the Genetic Society of America.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Riley St. Clair, and I'm also a member of the Communications and Outreach Committee. Thanks for joining.
And I would like to welcome our wonderful panelists who are academics who moved from science into science and medical writing careers. Dr. Maria Ali, Dr. Beryl McCoy, Dr. Ashley Waldron, and Dr. Gertrude Nonterah. And in a moment, our panelists will introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their backgrounds. And after this, we will address the questions that were submitted during the registration process by the attendees. However, if you are an attendee and you have any additional questions, you can always also send them additionally through the chat. We will be monitoring them, and if we'll have enough time, we'll be able to address them. So right now, without further ado, I would like to give my virtual mic to our first panelist, Maria Ali, who actually also happened to be my colleague at the University of Virginia.
Thanks, Anna. It's so good to see you again. As Anna mentioned, I got my PhD at the University of Virginia. I was in the biology department working in neurobiology, developmental neurobiology. I was in the lab of Dr. Sarah Casinas, and we use zebrafish as a vertebrate model. So I received my PhD last July, actually almost exactly a year ago. I then took on a postdoc position at Virginia Commonwealth University, where I was studying hematopoietic stem cells, still within zebrafish, but I just really was not happy to be back at the bench. I really loved the writing aspect and everything that kind of happened at the end of the PhD a lot more than the basic bench science. And so then that's when I began to think about transitioning to medical writing, and I reached out to a couple of other graduate students. Who went on to medical writing and kind of made connections that way. And so I started my position as an associate medical writer in February with Open Health. And this is a great position because it acknowledged that I had writing experience through my PhD, but I had never worked in a formal communications agency before. So it was a great role because I am doing a lot of the writing and a lot of tasks. I'm not in training all the time, but I do get additional training as an associate writer. And I feel that with this position, I finally am like getting paid what I'm worth while also receiving the training that I need to kind of really advance me to the next stages in my career as a medical writer. So yeah, happy to answer any questions about all of that. And so I'll pass it over to Dr. McCoy.
It's a little jolting to hear doctor. I really appreciate it, but I left, after I got my PhD, I wasn't in science anymore. So thank you, everyone. It's nice to hear the title. So I'm Beryl. Hi, everyone. I finished my PhD in 2018 in biochemistry. Basically, I studied virus-like particles and how they could be used as materials. So it was a little bit of an intersection of like soft materials and chemistry. And I think the impetus for me going into a science writing career was a mix of things. I actually really liked bench science and maybe would have stayed in science, but because of my lifestyle, I wanted to live somewhere very rural, in a cabin in the woods, and there weren't a lot of options for that. So I got the bug in my ear to move toward communication. I don't know, I think I was always drawn to it. I always liked writing, and looking back now, I think it was kind of a clear career choice for me. But maybe I was in my PhD program for 6 years. So maybe in like year 4 or 5, I just started seeing opportunities for writing. My university started a science writing blog across departments, and I started writing and editing. I took like a like a career advice course, and they're like, huh, you like creative businessy things. And that made no sense to me because I didn't think I was a business person. But essentially when I finished my PhD, I just went straight into freelance writing, and we can talk about the struggles of doing that. But I think being in grad school gives you a lot of those skills, like the uncertainty and just the downright grit. And then I got really lucky falling into NPR because I just met one of the science correspondents, and then over time built a relationship and got them to train me to be a producer on a science show, which I still to this day cannot believe that happened. It was a lot of luck, being in the right place at the right time, but also setting myself up. So if you have questions for what you should be doing, happy to answer that, and anything I maybe missed. So I will pass to Ashley.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Ashley Waldron. I am currently a senior scientist at adjunct. I completed a PhD in biology as well at the University of Vermont in 2019. And did a short postdoc at Brown University after that. And my research focuses were in sort of developmental biology, mainly neurodevelopment and sort of molecular mechanisms of cell differentiation. And it was all, stuff that I was really excited about and interested in. But I think, over that time, I was also developing a really interest in science writing, and sort of falling less interested in sort of standard bench science. And actually your Burley's mention of wanting to live in a rural setting, cabin in the woods, resonated with me. Like I really wanted to sort of be out of the city, and there's not a lot of options. So science writing seemed to be like a good sort of flexible kind of field. So after my postdoc, I worked as a technical writer. That was my first sort of writing position, for a company out of Boston, a synthetic biology and genetic engineering company called Ginkgo. And that gave me a really sort of interesting start at sort of writing as a career, and sort of being tangential to science, but not doing science. And now I'm as I mentioned, a senior scientist at adjunct, which is a plasmid repository. And my main role is actually scientific support, so helping our users, mainly basic science researchers across the globe. And I also contribute a lot to our educational materials, so things like our blog posts, and the protocols and science guides that you can find on our website. And it has been a really great position. It allows me to work remotely. I got a chance to move to a cabin in the woods, but I still get to communicate both sort of broadly through blog posts to researchers at all stages, as well as directly through like emails and phone calls with researchers, and sort of have that real connection to science without having to be at the bench all the time. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. And I will pass to our last panelist, who I believe is Gertrude.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Gertrude Nonterah, but I ask people to call me G. And I finished my PhD in microbiology and immunology in 2015. Went straight into a postdoc after that at UC San Diego. And then, during my postdoc, it was really cemented, the fact was really cemented in my mind that I did not want to be in academic research. And so I actually started a side business. I started a side business as a postdoc as a freelance writer. And back then I wrote everything from product descriptions to website content. And eventually in 2018, funding did run out for my postdoc. And when it ran out, that was the sign I needed to get out of academic research, because sometimes you want to make a decision, but you keep stalling because you're so scared. And then something happens and you're like, okay, this is it. So funding ran out. that meant I lost my job and I freelanced as a writer for 3 years. And so as a freelance writer, lived off freelance writing income, writing for health and medical based businesses for 3 years. And somewhere in there, I also became an adjunct faculty. And so my real, or not real, I was still a real writer as a freelancer, but my first full-time medical science writing job came in 2021 after I'd been freelancing for that long. And currently I work as a medical content specialist at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And basically my job is to work with the R&D teams, to work with the marketing teams, to work with internal training teams to produce content that supports the business that we do here. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you all. You all have a very different career trajectories, which I think it's very interesting for attendees to see that you can get into those careers through the very different paths. The question, I think one of you mentioned a little bit, but the questions we were getting a lot in our registration was kind of like how, as a graduate student, or when you are still a postdoc, how can you prepare yourself to move into those careers? If you already know, for example, you want to move to science writing or to medical writing, is there anything you can do during the graduate school to become more competitive in the market? Are there some kind of internships that would be useful to have, or any kind of experiences?
Yeah, I can go first.
Go ahead.
So the first thing I would say is, first of all, medical and science communications is a wide field. And so to first of all, kind of know where you kind of want to be on that spectrum, because there's several types of roles that you could potentially have. So one of the things I always tell people, when people tell me they want to become a medical writer, want to get into science writing, is, well, what exactly do you want to do? Because you have regulatory writing, right? You have health journalism, you have what Burley is doing, which is more on the creative side of things. You have more technical writing, right? So you kind of have to think about what is it that you want to do. Obviously, all of us want to communicate the science. We don't want to necessarily do it, but we're happy communicating it. So you kind of want to know where on the spectrum you want to be. So I'd say do some research on that. And then, most PhD programs give you everything you need to actually be in this field. You just have to look for the opportunities, right? So you're writing papers, you're writing protocols, you're doing lab meetings, right? You're communicating your science and your results. You're already doing a lot of that work. So again, look at where you want to be, look at what you're already doing, and see how you can begin to hone on those skills that allow you to be in a particular type of role within medical communications, because it is a wide field.
Yeah, I can sort of jump in. I guess I would echo that too, that like, as in grad school, we learned a lot of the skills just naturally that I use every day. I can say, like, I worked, my program for my university had a graduate writing center. And I worked as a writing tutor there for the last year and a half of my PhD. And so that, I think, helped, was just like a little extra thing on my resume. And it also gave me a lot of confidence in my own writing skills. So, if you have a writing center, definitely reach out to them, use them. They're usually really helpful, or, consider being a tutor. And yeah, like all of the writing that you're doing, and then giving presentations. And I think, it's keeping that in mind when you go to apply for positions too, like make sure those are the things you're highlighting in your cover letter, and sort of getting that across, that these are the skills you have, this is how they apply to the job that you're applying for. Like, I think that, making that really clear. If you don't have a chance to do something extra or like an internship, like there's still ways to get in.
So I would just add, I was on a biotechnology training grant in grad school. So probably for the first 3 or 4 years, I can't really remember now, but through that, I took a lot of courses in translational science, how a drug becomes FDA approved, all of those things. And that was really helpful. I immediately am using it, especially if you go into medical writing specifically, you're going to be looking at clinical trial data and all of those things. So my PhD was in more basic research, just looking at development, but having all of those extra classes and extra courses really helped me just be familiar with all of the processes that I'm learning about. So I would say definitely broaden your horizons, consume as much as you can about the different types of fields there are, learn about biotech companies, industry, all the different levels that exist. And it doesn't have to be like super in depth. I mean, a class would obviously be ideal, but just make sure you're familiar with all of those different parts, because you have to be nimble. Nothing that I'm working on is neuroscience, but that's fine with me. I'm interested in all kinds of science, but just be kind of prepared that you're not always going to be able to be in control of what you're writing or the area that you're writing about. Kind of unlike grad school, it's very focused, but you're going to be expected to kind of have a more broader understanding of science in general and drug development in general, depending on which field, like medical writing specifically for me. If you want to do that, you're going to need to know a lot more than just whatever your area is right now.
I would just add to that, find a community. I think what Maria and G were talking about, doing your research and kind of getting an idea of the field can be hard on your own. But if you find a community, which there are quite a lot of graduate level based communities that are interested in writing out there, it does a few things. It gives you a bunch of resources that we might not be able to talk about in an hour panel. And it also kind of gives you the momentum, especially if you are in a lab that doesn't support doing writing or anything extracurricular or not being in academia. So the few that I would recommend are, I actually got my start with the NPR PsyCommers, which are now the BU PsyCommers. So it's Boston University, the program moved, but it's just a group of, mainly graduate students interested in either supplementing their science with communication skills or moving into the field. If you want like a science writing community, National Association of Science Writers has a really cheap student membership cost. I think it's like $30, and that's their job board is how I found my first few freelance gigs. And then what is it, ComSciCon? Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah, ComSciCon, look that one up. And the second piece of advice I would just say is just, you need to write. You need to physically do it. That was one of the things I avoided. I was like, oh, I want to go into writing. I'll research and I'll talk to people about it. But like sitting down and writing is actually really hard for me. It's a love-hate relationship. And so doing it will let you know if it's something you want to do. And I think it will help you decide what kind of writing you want to do.
Thank you all. I feel like summarizing what you just said is that there are many, many types of communication and writing related career types and jobs out there. And I think when we're early in the grad school, it's really good to explore first. And I think that's great with our attendees are here. I think like it's a great first step for that exploration process and learning. And then with that, you can figure out which kind of experiences you can go towards too. And you're right, it's called ComSciCon. I was organizing one of the chapters at the University of Virginia. So if you're interested, you can also like organize your own chapter at the university or figure out if there's some local group. I think kind of going a little further in the career, because this was questions about the beginnings, especially when you're still an academic, but a lot of people were also wondering what the career growth looks like. And something that a lot of people is not kind of, I feel like, have trouble asking, especially in normal conversation, what are like a salary expectation in those kind of careers? I think, I'm not sure, I think Maria, you mentioned that you're finally feel like getting paid what you're worth. So I would assume that, that it's better than academia, but yes, people are asking like how can you grow your career, what direction, like where to go and what they can expect in salary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Salary wise, I would say you can begin to look at like the upper 5 figures to 6 figures. Definitely the rates tend to fall somewhere in there. The more experience you have, of course, the more likely you're gonna get paid higher. So I would say, think about that range. I would say maybe from $70,000 on, especially if you're starting as a junior writer, you may start at that level, but it grows quickly. So that's, it will grow quickly. The second thing was career trajectory, right? And I think that's, again, it's different. But from what I'm doing right now in my role, right, and I think I described what I do. I'm a writer that sits in between the R&D team, the marketing team, and internal trainings. So in my role, I could go several ways. I could go up to becoming maybe in a few years, or in some years, maybe becoming a very technical marketing director or VP or something of that sort. So you do have an opportunity to keep on going it up within what I'm doing right now. So I do a lot of marketing, so I could go up in marketing, right? I could be a marketer with a technical scientific background. I could also be the person that coordinates all the trainings for the scientists that are coming in, or for the business development managers that sell our products, right? Or I could continue to work deeply with the R&D team and supervise a group of junior writers, right? So there's several ways that, for me, that could go.
I can offer some insight into the kind of freelance and journalism side. I think it's a little bit less good news for the journalism side, especially from freelancing. And I'm happy to share hard numbers. So I graduated in April. So I had of 2018, and I had that salary until, April. For the rest of the year, I made $6,000. I was very privileged to be able to have, I lived in a tiny cabin without a lot of rent. My loans were deferred because I wasn't making any money. So I was able to live off of that and my partner's salary, which not everyone can do. The next year, so the next full year of freelancing, I was able to make $25,000 on my own, just freelancing. And then the next 2 years were 50 and 50. For my cost of living, that was okay. It meant that I wasn't really saving or getting ahead, but I was happy freelancing. The NPR thing was just like a really happy mistake. But for journalism, I think somebody said like in the 80s, people were getting $1 per word. And if you can get $1 per word now, it's considered baseline good. It's really hard to make, I think, a living off of freelance science journalism. There are people that definitely do it. There are people that mix science journalism with more what you would consider kind of PR work, which is what I tended to do. And then I can't really speak to salaries in the journalism world just because I work for public radio, National Public Radio. So our salaries aren't going to be maybe as competitive at the producer level. So I think that it's better if you can get a job, but I think the market is a little bit more difficult, and there's a lot of turnover in journalism, people moving around. But you get people in the field because they really love what they do. I really love my job. So it's sometimes you can get the best of both worlds, but yeah, it's definitely more lucrative, I think, in like the technical writing and medical writing fields.
Yeah, I could sort of concur with that. I mean, I'm not in journalism, but I went from being a technical writer in a private company and took a salary cut to go to my current job, which is Gene is a nonprofit. So our salaries aren't as competitive as some sort of, biotech industry sort of type positions. But we all do really love what we do, and we have great benefits. And as far as sort of career progression, I'm still pretty early on in my career, I think. Sort of what I'm looking at, though, I mean, within specifically AdGene, we have it could grow more towards sort of our marketing sort of side of things, or more towards sort of general sort of content design. And so those, like, basically sort of the goals would be sort of director of content and sort of our whole sort of content strategy and how we communicate with our users. And so that's kind of, so let it be less on the like actual creation and more on strategy, which.
So someone who just shopped around on the market, I can tell you as an associate medical writer, you can get everything from 70 to 85,000, depending on which agency you go with for this position. And then it goes up from there. So associate medical writer is the lowest at my company, or any associate title is usually like the lowest. And then it goes to medical writer, senior medical writer. And then from there, you can become a medical director, associate, you know, to senior, and everything has all these layers of promotion. And because of that, it's cool. So you can stay a writer, you know, forever. I have a writing mentor at my company, which is an excellent program that they have here. And she has been a medical writer for 30 years, and she's like a super senior. I don't even know what her title is, but basically she loves medical writing. And so that's what she does. And she continues to get promoted and stay a medical writer throughout her career. But you can also go to a medical director track, which is where you are very familiar with what the client wants, the client perspective. Almost all medical directors start as medical writers, basically writing for that client. And then once they become familiar with what the client wants and expects, you can become a medical director. And medical directors oversee medical writers and kind of review their work, and kind of are kind of the in-between and dealing with clients and medical writers, and in that way. So it's kind of, as a medical writer, I like not dealing directly with clients. I like kind of having that medical director buffer, but if you wanted to be a writer for a while and then work more closely with clients, that's also an option for you. So even within my agency, which is not the biggest, but we have a lot of different avenues you can go. There's also editorial direction. So it kind of just depends on what company you get in with. But also something I'll say is, once you have kind of medical writer in your title on your LinkedIn, it's very transferable, very mobile. You'll start getting like recruiters all the time. So that's also nice too, is get in, get some experience, make sure you find somewhere you like. A company that has training is great, but if you get enough experience, you can also, you know, go to other places very easily. And that's a great way to also kind of advocate to get those salary increases that you might be looking for by, you know, shopping around and seeing what's out there.
Thank you all for sharing, you know, all your knowledge and hard numbers also. I think it, for a lot of people in different situations, that maybe make or break, you know, kind of how much you make, because as you said, some people can afford doing what they love and just earning less, but some may have to, because of their situation, decide something else. I think that's an important consideration. But from what you've been mentioning before, one thing that struck me, that's we have two people here that live in a cabin in the woods, which seems, well, like my dream also. And I was wondering, because there were also questions kind of like about how this job relates to a work-life balance and kind of like your lifestyle, how you can fit it well. So I was curious to hear it from you, like how it works, like for example, work from home possibilities. It seems like it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say yes. There's a lot of opportunity to work from home. I worked for a communications agency before I started working at Thermo Fisher, and we were a hybrid company, so we worked like 4 days from home, or like 3 days from home and 2 days in the office. Currently in my role, because I do have to work with R&D scientists, the R&D scientists are on site, so I have to be here. But I'm here maybe 3 days out of the week, and then I'll work a day or two from home. So there is a lot of opportunity for you to be remote, but that's also going to depend on the type of role you have and who you have to collaborate with in order for your work to move forward.
Yeah, I think it's definitely job dependent. My position is really amenable to working remotely, and my company is super flexible about what their employees need to sort of function best. So I was able to work remotely, and my company is based in Boston, and I really did not like living in Boston. And so I was able to sort of move out a ways and work permanently remotely. I work well remotely. If you have to be sure that you are able to work remotely, it can be very isolating. or sometimes like some people I know need people around them to sort of help focus, you know, can easily get distracted by other stuff happening at home. But if you're kind of good at sort of working sort of independently and staying, you know, motivated on your own, like working remotely is a really great opportunity and gives you a lot of flexibility to, meet not only your career goals, but your personal goals too. And so I really love where I live, and also really love my job. So it's a good combination.
Yeah, I chose my position because it was remote. After kind of being forced to write my dissertation remotely, I realized I loved it. And whenever I would write in general, like all throughout my life, I would always find a quiet place alone to write anyways. So working remote just makes sense for me. And I really liked medical writing because the one person I reached out to that helped me get into this field had been remote since like 2015 or something, you know, long before anyone was forced to. And medical writing in my field, I think everyone on my team is remote. I think like one person actually works in an office, and my company is based in the UK. They do have 2 offices in America, but it's really well set up to work remote, and I really enjoyed that. I'm also a mother and I have a fiance, and it's crazy. And so that's also what I was looking for. We're just a little more flexibility. If I need to run out and grab something or like anything I need to do, I don't have that like, where are you going? That kind of pressure that I kind of felt when I was working in an office. And so I really enjoy working remote, but you do have to be self-motivated. You have to keep yourself on task. I made sure I have an office that is like my workspace, and I don't come in here when I'm not working, to kind of keep that separation. So it depends on whatever works for you, but I love working remote, and my company is well set up to do that. So I think if that's what you want, it's definitely available, and just kind of look for positions that say remote in it, and it should be fine.
Yeah, I think it's knowing what you want, which it's okay if you don't, you can try and figure it out. I feel like the discipline you need to work from home is a muscle that you build though. I had 3 years of experience coming out of grad school where I could set goals for myself, and it was okay that I did it over time, because I just say, okay, these are the hours that I want to work. Maybe I didn't get it perfect for a little bit of time, but then I built that muscle. So by the time now I have a full-time job, I'm very comfortable working from home. But if you know what you want, then you can use it, as like when you're interviewing, you're being interviewed, but you're also interviewing that company. So make sure that their values and their practices are something that work for you. I know when you're first starting out, that might not be something that you can prioritize, but as you move up in your career or change positions, just think of it as a two-way street where you're giving them something, but they're also giving you something.
Thank you so much for addressing this. It seems like most of the writing jobs are very flexible. At least you can, if you really want to, you can find company if that's a priority for you. And that kind of goes along with another question we had submitted through the registration. A person was asking, how does the field accommodate individuals with disabilities? I felt like this kind of options of working from home can be much better for individuals with disabilities, but I'm not sure, do you know anything, any individuals in your companies or like the practices in the field?
I know because my previous company was very much remote, and then we moved to a hybrid model that was definitely supported. Individuals with disabilities were supported in that sense. And if you communicated that there was a reason why you couldn't be in the office, nobody got mad. You could do that if you wanted to work five days a week remotely. That was possible. So there are opportunities definitely, and I think yes, you're right that this move to remote work definitely is helping with individuals. I have a child with special needs, so there are things that I need to help him with, and so it's kind of nice to be able to do that when you work, from home. So there is that support, and all you need to do is communicate what you need. At least from where I have worked. I don't know about other places.
Yeah, I would say I can add, my current company is very sort of, if you need something, you communicate with them and they'll do their best to sort of make accommodations. And that applies to everybody at my company, whether I'm the writers or people in the lab. We try to be really sort of all inclusive.
Not sure if Barley and Maria wants to add something, but if you're not, then I'll just move to another question, actually just submitted through the chat. It's not about disability, but it's about people just like me who are non-English, non-native English speakers. And is it easy for them to enter business like a science writing or medical writing? And for whoever asked this question, like, I just want to speak from my own experience. I'm moving into, like, I started freelance science writing a little bit right now and working as a communication specialist. So for me as a non-native speaker, it was possible, but it took more work. But I'm also curious to hear from our panelists, what's your experience? I'm not sure. I think you are all non-English native speakers, but I may be wrong, but I'm not sure if you know anyone who in your companies who's non-English native speaker.
So I think most of the time, I always take issue with the phrase non-native English speaker. The reason why is because there's some of us that did grow up in English-speaking countries, but we don't have a British or American accent. This does not mean that the person is a non-native speaker. So that's one distinction that is really important to make, that a person may have grown up in an English-speaking country. It doesn't make them a non-native English speaker. So instead of focusing on that as a weakness, I would say that since you have written documents and you have written protocols and you have written different pieces whilst you have, or communicated your science whilst you've been in this role, and you may be, because I tend to work with a lot of internationals and people that consider this English as a second language sometimes, and people always are afraid of that, right? And I don't want you to make that the reason why you don't get into this field. Yes, good grammar and spelling and all that is you should have those, but don't allow that to also be the reason why you don't get into the career, right? There is space for you, there is opportunity for you. We need more scientists and we need more creative people to join us. So don't let that stand in your way. I know that's not a real scientific solution for all you scientific solution seekers. It's more motivational, but don't let that stand in your way. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that and say that I would even see it as a strength, because you're going to have experiences that other people don't in this field, and that's a big strength. And just knowing multiple languages, I think, is also a strength.
And on the multiple languages thing, please let me insert this. There is work for translators, by the way. So there is also opportunity for Spanish, French. I've seen, I think, Arabic. So there is opportunity for that. So if you speak some of these languages, actually, you may be able to leverage it.
Yeah, I was just going to add two quick things on that note. One is within my company, we have like a group where people I see all the time are requesting, can anyone help translate this? And it's definitely an asset to be able to have that skill set, so we don't have to go out of the company and hire an outside translator. So that's one. And I think number two, like, nobody speaks the way that medical writing is written, so that's all a skill I had to learn. We have to learn anyways. And so I think that I don't think really we have that much more of an advantage. I think it's all something we're learning all of the time. So I think as long as you are able to be successful in, your grad school and getting your feedback that way, and I think take advantage while you can practice as much being a medical writer while you have that opportunity. But I mean, it's all something that we have to learn and continually grow at. So I know that I had to learn a lot when I got to grad school. I didn't know tons of the vocabulary. So I think, of course, I have advantages in that, it is probably a bit more natural, but it is something that you have to learn. It's a skill like anything else. So just as you continue to grow that, make sure that is highlighted, that you know how to write in a medical capacity, and that you have those skills as well, because it's something that you have to learn no matter what.
One other thing from the journalist perspective is that when you are writing for audio or, you know, written pieces in journalism, you cultivate your own voice, and having a unique voice is always something people are looking for. And so I think that it is another way to look at that being a skill and an asset that you have.
Thank you so much. And thank you for those encouraging words, because for me, I as a non-native and from foreign country, also a person who wanted to move to communications, that I was discouraged by some people. So I know that there are a lot of people who may have kind of the same experiences. And I think that's where those kind of questions are coming from. So I want to thank panelists for those encouraging words, and also that, like Maria, like you said, this is a skill and this is something learnable. And even if my accent is not there and probably I will never sound like a British person, it doesn't mean I cannot write, good. This can be always learned. So I want to thank you very much for that, for those encouraging words. I also had some questions here from somebody who has master's degree, and they were wondering, is it possible to move those career if you do not have PhD but you have a master's in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so my previous job as a technical writer at a biotech company, I worked with the more senior technical writer who was like training me, just had a bachelor's degree in English. He didn't know any science. I was kind of there as a scientist, but it was definitely, PhD was absolutely not required.
I do think for my field, you'll have to have some sort of experience in some type of way, though, to get your foot in the door. I know, like, looking at smaller biotech companies for opportunity in that way, see if they have internships or writing. You will have to kind of demonstrate that you do have that higher level scientific knowledge, especially as a medical writer. It's a ton of data that you're getting. It's a lot of technical things that you're having to process through and then be expected to write about quickly. So not having it, I'm sure it is possible, but you will need to gain that experience of knowing how research is done some other way. So I would definitely recommend looking for other opportunities that are for master's degrees to get that experience, so then they can leverage that in your writing later.
In journalism, sometimes it's better to just have a master's, because you have to break the habit when you move from academia to science writing, that you're speaking to a more general audience, and it takes a while. I mean, I would use words that my mentor would be like, nobody knows what carbon nanotubes are, Burley, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, of course. So it doesn't so much matter whether you have a master's or a PhD. I think you get the skills that are transferable into journalism, and oftentimes you have to learn a lot of other skills, which you've been in grad school, you know how to learn. But it's not going to make that big of a difference. And for the people who want to do education in science writing, which I have resources if you have questions about that, you know, if you're going to do a program like that and a PhD, that's a lot of school. So if you know you want to switch and you don't want to stay in science, sometimes it's better to leave, especially if you're miserable. A lot of my friends were miserable, and it was better for them to leave their program than finish the PhD.
I think this kind of like brings us full circle into the beginning when you were talking about the importance of looking into different roles and exploring where you want to go. I think this kind of brings us there, that if you look in the beginning, especially of your graduate school, whether it's master's or PhD, and like, let's say if you're thinking about quitting the PhD, it's good to look what this kind of positions that you're interested in, whether they're required or no, and is it worth to pursue it if you accept, like, some people are miserable. So I think that's a very important thing that we were bringing up in the beginning, the kind of exploration to do. I want to switch gears a little bit, because we had a person who was asking how much of your work involves teamwork versus working alone. And you touched upon this question before, like when we were talking about when you work from home, but even when you work from home, when you work alone, you are still part of the team. So what is the balance? And kind of also along with that line, how does your role fit within the team? Like with which team members do you work more, and if you could expand a little more on that.
Yeah, I'll start here too. I'm also answering people's questions in the chat because there's so many interesting questions there. So anyway, for me, right, I've worked in 2 companies, so CG Life and then Thermo. And at CG Life, I definitely worked with I worked with PR specialists. I worked with the graphic design team. I worked with copywriters, right? So there are different people I worked with. Some weeks I would have meetings on meetings on meetings, right? Or some days. And then some days I would just write all day. So really day to day was different. In my current role, it's the same thing. I may go into the lab to see what the R&D scientists are doing and to verify a protocol I'm writing. I may be on a call all day with the marketing team because we just crossed into the second half of the year. We have to do H2 planning of content, right? So there's a meeting coming up where I'm going to be in that meeting all day. And then there are days where I don't have any meetings and all I'm doing is just writing, right? So it really is different. But I think for me, the teamwork actually helps my work a whole lot because I don't know everything. I'm not a repository of all information. And that's one thing that I think it's really important to know, that you don't know everything. And so it's good to ask people that know. And for me, it's been, so yes, there's a lot of teamwork for me, but depending on the day or week, I may not interact with anybody, or I may just have interaction overload. And I'm an introvert, so that can be tiring, but it's also helpful.
So for me, it's very individual. I have a manager, and I'm actually on 2 different accounts. So each account has their own medical directors, as I was saying before, and you will be assigned different projects based on what the client needs. And then when you get a new project, especially as associate writer, you'll get a download for every project, which is basically just kind of telling you what this project is and how it fits with the other projects and kind of just a bit of a background. But then all of the writing is by myself. So I am talking to people every day. I'm talking to medical directors. I have tons of access to them. We use Teams, Slack, all that kind of stuff to ask questions. But when it comes to actually like writing, I'm writing it, and then I send it, and then they give me comments, and then I address the comments. It's a back and forth. So there's not a lot of like team collaboration in my field. And I think it's mostly like that for medical writers. It's kind of like, I do like love my teams, and we kind of cover for each other if one of us is out. So we are able to take time off and those kind of things. But for the most part, you're working on it one at a time, usually with 1 or 2 other people reviewing your work, and then it goes off to the client, and then you get their feedback and you incorporate it. So it's kind of like a tag team type process.
Yeah, in my role, it's the writing part is very much independent, but we usually, depending on the project, may have a meeting at the beginning to sort of talk about overall goals and who our audience is and what makes sure that we're communicating the right thing. And then I'll go and like write up drafts and then share with the rest of the team to get feedback. So it's kind of a balance between sort of independent work and teamwork, which I find really nice.
When I was freelance, it was pretty independent, mainly because, you're writing, that's always independent. And I had so many different clients that it wasn't a team, which is very different from my work now. I still have independent work where I'm like cutting audio and like taping interviews. But I absolutely love working on a team, and it's because my team is amazing. So if you are going to go into something where it's teamwork, I would be really critical of the people to make sure that you work well with them and they're the type of people you want to spend time with. So it can vary, but I also have a feeling, like Maria said, that it's a lot of, you're writing. So that's usually a solo endeavor.
I see here also a question about kind of like how the typical week or day in your work looks like, but it seems like you've partly already addressed those kind of questions, asking when you were describing your individual versus teamwork. But maybe I was thinking about looking at it from a little different perspective, like how does your project looks like from when you're assigned something from the beginning to the end? How does that workflow usually works in your company?
Could you repeat the question? I'm trying to make sure I understand the question.
Yes. For example, because I assume that basically that you have different projects that you're working on with different people. So kind of like how it looks like from the inception when you are getting a project, you're being assigned, and how the workflow looks like to its completion.
Mm-hmm. So it's different. It's different. My experience is that it's been different for the two roles I filled. In my first role as a scientific content specialist, what I did was the project would come through we had account managers, and so that means that these people work with specific clients. So let's say a biotech client comes in wanting some white papers, some ebooks, and some website content. The business development people would do that and then bring it to the writers, right? And so my manager would then say, hey, G, you have to write this 60-page ebook, and this is exactly what they want. They want it to be educational, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, I would begin to write. Internally, we had editors. So I would give it to the editor, they would read and edit. And then from there, we would give it back to the account manager and they would give it to the client. The client would give us their feedback, bring back their document, and then we would address those edits. Sometimes those could go on. I have written as many as 10 versions of one document. I'm not kidding. Because sometimes you will finish writing it and then the client decides, well, we said to write this, but now we don't like it, or maybe we've moved on from the technology. The biotech and pharma world move very, very quickly. And so if you started writing something 3 months ago and it's today, maybe 3 months from now, they've moved on from that particular topic. And now they're like, oh, could you remove this? And so sometimes it can be a little bit of a back and forth, but that would be what would happen. And then by, hopefully at some point, one of the iterations, one of the clients will say, I like this is good, this fits with our vision. And then that project is done. So that was a little bit of, some days I spent the whole day going back and forth with the account manager, with them relaying feedback from the client for me, and so on and so forth. So that was what my original role was. Currently, we don't have editors. I am the content team right now. So I have to make sure everything is edited properly and all that. So I have to teach myself editing skills. But that's a little bit of what the workflow has looked like for me.
So mine is very similar to her, to Gertrude or G's first position. We have accounts teams and then medical directions, and then they kind of work together to figure out what the client wants. And then the medical director kind of figures out which writer it's appropriate. So as an associate medical writer, I'll tell you, you're going to be writing a lot of abstracts, a lot of posters, a lot of like shorter works for conferences, those kinds of things. And then, I've gotten a couple of manuscripts as well. And so in my company, we have really clear standard operating procedures. So an abstract should take you about a day. For an outline for a manuscript you have 10 days to write it. And they have like really clear expectations, but also the account teams are great. If you are assigned 3 manuscripts, that wouldn't happen. But if you were, you would say, I cannot take on these projects. And then they would work together to kind of make appropriate deadlines for you. So it's kind of nice. You have really clear expectations, but then you can also kind of work back and forth between the account managers to kind of tell them what you have capacity for in that way. And so because I have to go too, I just want to share this as well. In medical writing, especially for a communications agency like the one I'm in, it's a lot of like hurry up and wait. You know, you might not have anything for a day. You might kind of be trying to figure out, like pulling together things to do. And then all of a sudden your clients decide they need 6 abstracts for a Congress that's in 2 months, things like that. So you kind of have to be really flexible. You have to be able to really advocate for yourself. And so if you do feel like you're getting assigned too many things, you know, be able to stand up and say, hey, I can't take this on, or on the flip side, let your managers know, hey, I have capacity. I need some time here to do that. But that's kind of been my experience. I really enjoy that. I like that I work on 2 different projects. I think it helps keep me stimulated by not always having the same thing all the time. I like working on different types of projects within my role. And so I'll just say, you know, if you have any more questions for me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn to learn more about my specific type of role and experience. But this has been really great. I've even learned a lot as a panelist. So thank you, Anna, so much for inviting me and all of the other organizers. It was great to meet you all.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, everyone.
I want to ask if Burley and Ashley, do you want to add something? Because I see we have only 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll say from the journalistic side, it can be more fast-paced. And when I was a freelancer, it was a little bit easier. I'm a slow writer. I get scared by like super quick deadlines. So you could communicate if you were like to send in a freelance pitch, you could just say, hey, how about a first draft at this point? So you can figure that out with your editor. Now I work on a daily podcast. I don't know if I talked much about shortwave, but it's like every Monday through Friday there's a podcast and there are 3 or 4 producers. So like last week I did what's called a day turn, where we taped one day and it aired the next day, and that was a very, very stressful day. We all work together, but I think it can vary. And the biggest takeaway is that if you're on the journalism side, be prepared to juggle. I like to have a lot of things going on. I procrastinate by doing other work. That's how my workflow goes so well. Because if you want to make it like freelance journalism, you probably can't do just one story unless you move to features. And that's a whole different beast.
Yeah, I guess my work is also very sort of flexible, and it sort of multiple projects going on at any given time. And so one thing I mentioned, I'm on the scientific support team, so that's something really regular. Like I have emails to answer and troubleshooting to do. That like happens every day, but then so that how much of that I have to do varies, and then I fill in slow days with like bigger projects. Like I know I have a blog post that I have a deadline in a month or so, like I'll work on that for the day. So it's always sort of kind of shifting, and again, just being communicative with my managers and the blog editors and the various other teammates that I work with on, you know, what my capacity is at any given time.
We are at 2 p.m. So I just want to thank all of you for addressing. I think we addressed majority of the questions that our attendees had, either submitted through the chat or through the registration. I want to thank all the panelists very, very much for your time, and I hope it was useful to our attendees. I definitely learned something myself, and just I thank you a lot again, and I hope, you know, I know I see G often on LinkedIn. I follow her. I don't know about I don't follow our other panelists, but I know that G is giving a lot of good advice about science writing. So if you want to learn more, I would recommend also following her LinkedIn account. But thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.